relevant message. Draw close to God through relentless prayer. Live in community with us. No matter what stage of life you're in, we believe in establishing a strong foundation of faith to last a lifetime. Our kids and youth learn about Jesus in interactive ways to deepen their relationship with God. By joining a life group, adults of all backgrounds and ages find real, lasting, and caring relationships. Serve with us. Using our gifts, we share hope. Whether it is across the globe or in our own backyard, we believe Jesus calls us to build his kingdom by serving all who need his love. So, no matter where you are in life or in your faith, you are welcome here. Find community, find hope, find friendship. Walk alongside us as we love, live, and serve like Jesus.
Are here today. I'll say that again now that my microphone is on. I am so glad that you are here today to celebrate Easter with us and celebrate Jesus with us today. My name is Matt, and I'm the pastor here in Prior Lake. And today is a family service, and so we have people of all ages with us this morning. And so as I'm teaching today a little bit out of the Bible, if there are people of a younger age who are making a little bit of noise, who are go ahead and they are competing with me, that's great. We just love that they are here today. I guarantee that I will get louder than they can get. We're just thankful that you're here, that your whole family is here with us this morning. If you do need it, I've been asked to announce there is a family room right outside and up the stairs where the service is on if at some point you need that family room today. It is my privilege that I'm going to claim as the pastor here to declare to you today, he is risen. All right, that was pretty good. It's pretty good, but I'm going to do it again, all right? Are you ready? He is risen. And this is one of the 365 days a year that we celebrate Jesus' resurrection and the difference that it makes in our life. 366 days on leap year. We celebrate Jesus because his death and resurrection makes all the difference in our life. Jesus' resurrection can bring us from a place of spiritual death to life, a place of spiritual guilt to innocence and righteousness, a place of spiritual sickness to health. And today I want to take a few minutes and just look at how the resurrection of Jesus Christ can give us new life into the actual family of God. We can, through what Jesus has done in his death and resurrection, become a part of the family of God, adopted by God. Think about that for a minute. Adopted by God. Think about the blessing that human adoption is. A child who is adopted goes from outsider to insider. They experience sacrificial love. They experience new blessing, a place to belong. They experience a home. I was reading this week about a young man named Anthony in the area of Denver. Anthony just turned 14 as he sat in the police station waiting to be processed. He'd been in the foster care system his entire life and had been in 12 homes and 21 different schools by the time he turned 14. He was hard to handle, and by 14, he'd become a regular guest of police departments around Denver. This time, he was sitting in the police station because he'd broken into a middle-aged couple's suburban home. Anthony had walled himself off emotionally from others. His life, bouncing from home to home to home, school to school to school, had brought an understanding to his mind and heart that he was not acceptable and that he did not fit anywhere. So he didn't let people in. On this occasion, the couple whose house that he broke into happened to be at the police station giving a report to the police while Anthony was there. The husband of the couple, Jeff, felt for Anthony as he saw him sitting there and tried to start a conversation with him. Anthony was unresponsive. But Jeff and his wife Alexa had already raised 2 adult children, and so they knew how hard-headed teenagers can be. He was undeterred, and he kept trying to talk to him over and over again, trying to start a conversation with Anthony. All the while, Anthony just kept staring at the floor. But before they left the station that day, Jeff had broken through, and Anthony began to talk to him about his favorite subject, football. Anthony wound up spending 3 months in a juvenile detention halfway house. But Jeff and Alexa went to visit him every week, sometimes multiple times a week. Conversations at first were all about football. And then as the weeks went on, they became more personal and about more real topics. As it came close to the time for Anthony to be released, Jeff and Alexa told him that they'd begun the process of trying to adopt him. A process that would wind up taking several months. And Anthony was almost 15 by the time he moved into his new house with his new mom and dad. In an interview with their pastor, Jeff and Alexa said, there have been a couple of challenges in the few months since Anthony moved in and became their son. But they said since adopting him, there have been way more ups than downs. Anthony's been learning new skills and doing new activities. He's playing football for the school now. He's learning to cook a little bit. He's taken up archery, and he and Jeff go out and do archery together. Anthony said that for 14 years, he didn't think that he belonged anywhere or that anyone wanted him. But for the first time, he knows exactly where he belongs and who wants him. Adoption changed everything for Anthony. It rescued him from his old way of life. It introduced him to the sacrificial love of a parent, and it brought him to a place where he belongs. And when I hear Anthony's story, I can't help but be reminded of the story of every person who experiences the adoption of God, where we are saved from our old way of life and brought into a family of sacrificial love and belonging. The Bible talks about God's adoption of his children in a book in the New Testament called Galatians, and it's in Galatians chapter 4 that we read this. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir through God. Did you catch it? God has sent his Son into the world so that we might become his adopted children, adopted into the actual family of God. The first thing that we notice as we read through this passage, and actually as we read through the entire scripture, is this: we can only be adopted into God's family through Jesus. We can only be adopted into God's family through Jesus. Before Jesus saved me, I was not a part of the family of God. God is love. He's not just loving, he is love. He is truth. He is generosity. He is purity. And so the family of God is one of perfect love, perfect truth, and perfect generosity, and perfect joy. And I was made to be that, to fully be in the image of God, representing his character, being a part of his family. But like every person who has ever lived, I chose to live my own way rather than the perfect love, perfect joy, perfect righteousness that God made me for. And as such, I have fallen short of what God made me for. There is now a separation between me and God and the family of God that I was made for because of the sins in my life. And I could tell by the time I was 7 years old that I fell short of the life that God had made me for. When I was 7 years old, I knew that God was truth and that he had made me to speak truth in every instance. And yet, as I laid there by myself in my bed, what came to my mind? All of the times that I had lied to my parents or to others. Sometimes they'd even caught me. I knew that God is love and that he had made me to be perfectly loving towards others. And yet, as I laid there in my bed at night and thought about my relationship with my little sister, was that relationship filled with me constantly looking out for her best? Was that relationship with my little sister constantly filled with me doing what is best for her? No, day in and day out, it was filled with selfishness and sometimes even mean-spiritedness. I knew that God is the center of the universe and that he is intended to be the center of my life. And yet, every day I was living with my wants as the center of my life. By the age of 7, I understood that I fell short of what God's standard was for me and that my sins had separated me from God. As a matter of fact, the Bible puts my life before Christ this way. In Ephesians chapter 2, it says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind." Before Jesus, I wasn't a part of God's family of spiritual life, of obedience, of blessing. Instead, I was spiritually dead. I was a child of disobedience. I was a child in which God's punishment or wrath rested upon me because of my sin. I was separated from God and his family by my sins. And I wasn't just separated by a little bit. I was separated by more than I can represent here on the screen. Because I was sinful and selfish, and God is infinitely good, infinitely loving, infinitely truth, right? He's infinite in all of those things. And so the gap between me and God, it was a really, really big gap. How could I ever make my way across that gap in order to have relationship with God and be a part of his family? The message of the Bible is there is nothing I can do in order to bridge that gap. That it's only through the work of Jesus Christ that that gap can be bridged and we can come into the family of God. It's the only way. And it's only through Jesus, who is fully God and fully man, that that can happen. You'll notice that this passage says, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son." What are we to understand when we read again and again in the Bible that Jesus is the Son of God, the only Son of God, the one and only Son of God, phrases used about him? We're to understand that Jesus, the Son of God, has the same nature as God the Father. That's what we understand by that phrase, Son of God. Because a father and a son, the most important thing that they share is their nature. I have a father, his name is Dan, and we share a lot of characteristics. But the most important thing that we share is our nature. The most important thing that we share is not the fact that we both have blue eyes, that we both have the same last name, the fact that we are both avid Timberwolves fans, which is finally paying off, right? No, the most important thing that we share is our nature. We are both human beings, and that is always true of a father and a son. There is no father who is a cat and son who is a human being, or father who is a human being and son who is a tree. That's not how it works. A father and son always share the same nature. And so when we read about the Son of God, what we're to understand is, as the Father is divine, creator, infinite, judge, so the Son is divine, creator, infinite, judge. They share the same nature. But that isn't all. Not only is he the Son of God, fully sharing in the divine nature, but it says he was born of a woman. He is not only fully God, he is fully human. And as such, he is the only one who could deal with this separation problem that I had from God and his family, because the separation is, as I said earlier, an infinite separation. Who is the infinite being in the universe? It is only God. And so if anyone was going to be able to bridge this infinite separation, who did it need to be? It needed to be God. Sometimes the Bible refers to the separation that there is between God and the life that I've lived as my debt. God designed me to live a life perfectly in his character. Instead, I've lived a life where there's been a lot of sin and selfishness, and the difference between the life he designed and the life I've lived, the Bible refers to as my debt. It's a huge debt. Can I pay that debt? The Bible says, no way. And someone else just said, no way. Only infinite God can pay that immeasurable debt that I owe. But friends, it isn't God's debt. It isn't God's sin that has created this problem. And so the sacrifice that was needed to be made on behalf of humanity. The debt that was paid needed to be paid on behalf of humanity. And so it was essential that there was an infinite human being who would come and pay the price for us. Who is that infinite human being? There has only been one, right? The God-man, Jesus Christ. We can only be adopted into Jesus' family through Jesus, right? That is the only way. Fully God and fully human, paying our debt. And when that happens, and we're adopted into the family of God, there are such rich blessings within that adopted family. It says here in this passage that through adoption, we receive close relationship with God. We're told that we cry out, Abba, Father. That term, Abba, is an Aramaic term. Some of you think it's a Swedish term. No, it's an Aramaic term. That refers to the close or intimate way of addressing one's father. The rabbis tell us that 700 years before Jesus, it was toddler talk for one's father. Abba, 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 Abba. But over the course of 700 years, it had become the intimate address for one's father for people to use of all ages. And so the best translation of this word Abba is our word dad. I have a father. I told you his name is Dan. And when I am talking about my father with you, I may refer to him as my father. But when I am talking to my dad, I don't call him father. Father, what do you think about that? Right? Father, I really appreciate you and mom. No, right? We're closer than that. And so I say, Dad, what do you think? Dad, I love you and mom. Because it applies a closer relationship when we use that term dad. And that is the word that is used here, that when we are adopted into the family of God, we are not adopted into a family in which God stands aloof from us, an arm's length away as our father. No, we're adopted into a family in which God is our Abba, our dad, and he wants to be close to us. That's the father's heart. I know as a dad, that's my heart for my kids. Yesterday, my 23-year-old daughter took me to the zoo. And we walked around together as if she was 5, looking at all of the animals and talking about all of the animals. Oh, you guys, as a dad, does it get better than that? Right? Just to spend time with her. Later this week, my son has a college track meet he's going to be competing in, and I think I'm going to get a chance to go. And what I got to tell you, what I'm looking forward to isn't how he does in that track meet. It's the dinner I get to have with him after the track meet is over, where we get to hang out together. Because as a dad, what do I want more than anything? I want time with my kids. I want to be close to them. And the Father's heart is one that wants you to draw near to him. And he draws near to you. He is Abba, Father. Through adoption, we receive a close relationship with God. Not only that, through adoption, we receive a new spirit with new desires. A new spirit with new desires. When we're adopted into his family, the Bible teaches us that God sends his spirit to dwell within us. And that spirit gives us a whole new set of desires. We now desire God, right? That spirit cries out for God and cries out for the things of God. And so we're given an entirely new set of desires, and that new set of desires brings real transformation throughout our life. And friends, it's the only way that real transformation can take place in our life. New desires brought about by the Spirit. I think I've shared with you before that when I was in elementary school, I was hygienically challenged. I didn't shower very often. I wore sweatpants and ripped up baggy t-shirts to school every day. I never combed my hair. All that mattered to me when I was in the 5th grade was that football game that we were going to play at recess, and that my team would win that football game that we were going to play at recess. It was the only thing that mattered to me. And then there came a day when I began to notice that some of the girls in the school were kind of cute. Attractive, we might say. And all of a sudden, my life began to change. Now, my parents had been on my case to make some changes in these hygiene areas before. And when they talked to me about wearing different clothes or combing my hair or showering more or putting odor eaters in my shoes, there were times where there'd be a couple of days of change, maybe even a week, and then I would slip back into all of those old patterns. But all of a sudden, with a new set of desires, a new life began to be lived. And I began to shower each and every day before I went to school. And I asked my parents if they would buy me some clothes that were different than those sweatpants and ratty t-shirts. I even began to comb my hair, and I asked if for the first time I could get a haircut from a professional. Right? What had happened? There was a new set of internal desires that began to work through and transform how I lived my life. All of the browbeating or guilt or commands before that weren't strong enough to bring about that change. It was only when there was a different change, a change in my internal desires, that a genuine transformation began to take place. And that is precisely what God teaches us again and again in his word, that we can be made new in every part of our life because his Spirit comes to dwell within us and changes our desires so that what we want more than anything is him and the things of him. So God sends his Spirit into our life with a new set of desires that change everything in us. Finally, we see this amazing blessing that through adoption, we receive a forever inheritance. That we become a part of the adopted family and actually become heirs through what Jesus has done. We are heirs in the family of God, gaining an inheritance from our Father. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 4 says that it's a salvation that brings us an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you. How big is an inheritance from God? There is a general rule that an inheritance is proportional to the amount a parent owns. If my wife and I pass away today and we leave an inheritance to our kids, what are they going to get? They're going to get some old golf clubs, a couple of cars with dents in them, which they deserve because they put most of the dents in them. Right, some old books, some other stuff along the way. But let me tell you what they're not going to get. They are not going to get tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars because their parents don't have that. And an inheritance is proportional to what a parent has or owns. And so as heirs in the family of God, what can you discern about the size of the inheritance that you get if it is God who's giving you that inheritance? How much does he own? How great is the inheritance that we will get from the great God, our Abba, our Father? The Bible says it's an inheritance that's never going to perish. It's never going to be spoiled or contaminated. And the joy that you experience, it'll never fade. It's unfading. Through adoption, we receive a forever inheritance. So how can we be adopted? We said it is only through Jesus. What is my role in this? How can I be adopted into the family of God? The answer to that is only by placing my faith and trust in Jesus Christ as my Savior and Lord and King. The very next verse in 1 Peter 1:4 says, there's this inheritance that you receive if you're a child of God. 1 Peter 1:5 says, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. It is by placing your faith and your trust in Jesus that you become a child of God, adopted by God into his family. Jesus puts it like this in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. He says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Jesus says the kind of rest for your souls that only comes by being adopted into the very family of God can be yours if you'll come to me. If you'll come to me and believe in me and place your faith in me. If you'll take my yoke upon you, which is a picture that says, if you will enter into life as my disciple, following after me, you will experience genuine rest for your souls as my child, in my family, adopted into the family of God. Baptism is an expression that we have entered into the adopted family of God. Right? It's not the pathway in, it is an expression that we've entered into that adopted family of God through faith in Jesus Christ. And in the second service, we are going to have a number of baptisms of those who are here in order to declare, I am a child of God. I've been adopted through the work of Jesus Christ. And if you want to make that declaration today, we are going to have those baptisms in the second service, and you can come and talk to me between services, and we will make those arrangements because we'd love to have you express that you are a child of God today in front of everyone by being baptized. For those who've been baptized, Jesus says, I want you to participate in this tradition. I want you to participate in this action where you take bread and cup that symbolize my body and my blood that was given for you so that you might become children of God. We're going to enter into a time of taking the Lord's Supper. You were handed packets on your way in. If you didn't, there's still some out at the table, and you can make your way out and grab those if you'd like. And today, as the worship team plays, we're going to continue to prayerfully worship Jesus together. And when you're ready, you can take those elements. You don't need to wait for me today. When you're ready, you can take the bread and take the cup that represent what Jesus has done in order to bring us into his family. Let's continue to worship by singing Jesus' praises, continue to worship by taking these elements to celebrate him.